Life from lifelessness. Now, that's a big thing for people. Where did life come from? Well, where did water come from? Water from waterlessness. Now, if you believe in creation, God created the heaven and the earth and they created water and blah, blah, blah. But what is water? Water is oxygen and hydrogen. Where do they come from? Well, hydrogen and helium are kind of what make up stars, and stars are very good at churning out other elements. In fact, pretty much every element that we know about came out of a star because of the nuclear reaction of what stars do. They're taking the atoms of elements and creating new elements and spewing it out, putting it out there for everybody to use, right? So it spews out hydrogen and oxygen. Well, they're two separate elements. What happens? They get together and form water, liquid water, made up of two elements. Now, that's what elements do. Elements like to combine. They like to combine and make materials, and even complex materials like acids. If you've ever had a really good chemistry teacher and they do all kinds of really cool chemical experiments and really some outrageous reactions with color and fire and things fusing together, just really cool things that chemistry does. Chemistry does amazing things at combining different elements to create new materials and even, well, changing forms. And in fact, some of these chemical reactions are so lively they look alive. They do things that you think it's growing, but it's not really growing. It's a chemical reaction. Now imagine over billions of years these chemical reactions happening nonstop. All kinds of chemicals, all kinds of elements fusing together, mixing and mashing. Now, complex things like, say, amino acids, well, they're built up of building blocks. And these chemical reactions, there's elements that like to latch onto each other and grow. Now, you have to use your imagination some, but it's a lot better than just saying it's magic, God did it. But over 1 billion years, these chemical reactions happening form more complex structures. And over time, these complex structures are light sensitive. And they react to light. And that energy from light enables it to have other chemical reactions. And those chemical reactions may react to water, or heat, or whatever. But they become more and more complex because these elements, they like to bind together and do things, because that's what chemistry does. It just... Now, it's not like they took all these elements and they set them to a pool and said, okay, now make life. It didn't work that way. It took a very long time with varying environmental conditions. These environments were all created from chemistry and the nuclear fission. I mean, we got planets out of stars. We got you out of stars. All the elements made of you are made up of the planet and made up of you. And it's no surprise that the proportions of elements that are in you are the same in proportion to everything else in the universe. It's no coincidence. That's just how it works. So anyways, chemical reactions build up over time, billions of years, more complex, reacting to even gravity, but light and acids and bases, which is the opposite of acids. But they combined different things over a long period of time. And some things react more lifelike. It isn't life, but it's lifelike. And it isn't hard to imagine that over 1 billion years, that's a very long time, and it's very difficult for people to wrap their heads around that amount of time. And you get people going, well, why can't we make life in a laboratory? Gravity's real. They can't make gravity in a laboratory. Life is complex. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened over a long period of time. But you have to get your mind around that. Around 1 billion years. Think of your lifetime. Your lifetime is probably at max 100 years. Probably closer to 75. That is to 1 billion years what this is to the moon. Literally. This distance that I just took to the moon is what your lifetime is to 1 billion years. It is nothing. So, for what we've been able to do, knowledge-wise, in the past couple hundred years, has been astounding. Just think of what can happen over 1 billion years. It is a long time. Just look at chemistry. Find some videos of people doing chemical reaction experiments. And you can see chemistry does amazing things. Really cool, very lively chemical reactions. It is not inconceivable that over 1 billion years, with different environmental conditions, including light, because a lot of these chemicals react to light, sunlight, and the different gases, that it could, over 1 billion years, create very, very fundamental life. And one very, very fundamental life, which is basically a self-replicating element. It's not even really a cell. It's not like bacteria. It's not like all of a sudden bacteria formed. It took 1 billion years before we got anything close to bacteria. So, something that was self-replicating. That's all it took. And that's pretty much just a chemical reaction. That could build up over time to form very simple life, like bacteria or a virus. Very, very simple. But once you get that very, very simple thing, it takes 1 billion years to get that very simple thing. And then another 1 billion years to get something minor, very minor, more complicated. And you gotta imagine that over 1 billion years, life did not form once. Life, or something lively, like life, probably formed dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe millions of times. But only one worked out in the environmental conditions it had. And it was able to replicate, and replicate effectively, and quickly enough to establish itself to form more complex life over billions of years. Billions. Remember, billions of years. A walk to the moon, this is your life to walk to the moon. There, that's it. That's how far your life is to the moon. So 1 billion years, it's a very, very long time. And you have to wrap your head around that idea. Now, if you're stuck on the idea that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, I'm sorry, I can't help you, because obviously your brain cannot comprehend anything beyond the very minuscule information available. Because there's a lot of information available. But look at some videos of chemistry, chemical reactions, and you'll start getting an inkling of the possibility of life forming over 1 billion years into something almost like life, not jumping from like a pool of chemicals to life, but a chemical reaction that almost was like life and reacted to things like sun and the gases in the atmosphere. A very long time for this to happen. And of course, once it started going, it went quicker. And the more there was, and the more diversity, the more complex it was, the quicker it went. And the quicker it goes, the more variations there are in life. But it took a couple billion years to get the simplest, the very simplest forms of, it's almost hard to call it life, but life-like chemical reactions. Because what is life? Something that reacts to the environment, something that reacts to sun. It's a reactive process. That's what life is, initially. And it took a long time. And that's what you have to wrap your head around. A very long time for this to happen. It didn't just go, one day there was life. It took a billion years. A billion years of just churning elements on this planet. And I'm sure it happened on other planets too. And maybe it happened on Mars. There's evidence that there was life on Mars. And maybe that didn't work out. Maybe, for whatever reason, got hit by an asteroid, something moved, whatever. Didn't work out. But maybe it got to a certain point that there was life on Mars. And it looks like there might be evidence that that's possible. Hell, it might still be there in the very basic forms of a chemical, lifelike behavior that isn't quite life as we would call life. But life from lifelessness is not impossible. Magic, I'm not going to say that it's not impossible, but really, magic, Harry Potter is magic. We created magic to explain things we could not explain. That's where magic comes from. God is magic. That's why we have God, to explain the things we couldn't explain. And now we can explain most of that stuff. Not all of it, but you have to use your imagination. And that's what scientists do. They use their imaginations to come up with ideas of how things may have happened. And then they figure out experiments to prove how things happened. But it takes time. And saying that you cannot create life in a laboratory is just silly. Because you can't create gravity in a laboratory. And you're not going to argue against gravity, are you? Are you? Of course not. So quit using that example for life. Life happened. Not overnight. It took a very long time. So it went from life to lifelessness. It went from lifelessness to active chemical reactions to something lifelike to liveliness to life-ish to a cellular level to, a very, very long gradual process to get life. It's not impossible. In fact, it's kind of logical. It seems like it's almost inevitable if you think about it. Anyhow, I am Tom, your friendly neighborhood atheist. And I don't believe in life from lifelessness. Directly, I believe it took a long time. And that's not inconceivable. It's a lot better than magic. Anyways, good night.